One spilled tray, one stolen dance. When server Alana Brooks ruins billionaire Julian Marin's tux at the city's most elite gala, she expects to be fired, not swept into a world of secrets, scrutiny, and possibly love. Before we get into either story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The city lights twinkled against the dark sky as Alana Brooks adjusted her plain black uniform in the employee bathroom of the Grand Harbor Hotel. At 33, she had worked more catering jobs than she could count. But tonight was different. The Blackstone Gala wasn't just any event. It was the social highlight of the year. Remember, don't make eye contact with the guests, Jenny, the catering supervisor, reminded the staff as they gathered in the service area. You're here to serve, not to be seen. Alana nodded, pinning her curly brown hair under the required cap. She didn't need the reminder. So, after years of working jobs like this, she'd mastered the art of invisibility. Becoming part of the background was how she survived. "These shoes are killing me already," she whispered to Marco, another server who'd been assigned to her section. She had borrowed the black pumps from her neighbor since her own pair had finally fallen apart last month. "Just 6 hours to go," Marco said with a sympathetic smile. "Think of the overtime pay." Alana thought about the pile of bills waiting on her kitchen table, the overdue rent notice, the electric bill with its threatening red stamp, her mother's medication costs. Yes, the overtime would help, but it would barely make a dent. The glass-domed ballroom of the Grand Harbor Hotel was transformed into a wonderland of crystal and light. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables draped in white silk. Fresh flowers perfumed the air. Outside the massive windows, the harbor waters reflected. The stars. "It's like a fairy tale," Alana murmured despite herself as she arranged glasses on her serving tray. "A fairy tale we're not invited to," Marco replied with a wink. "Now remember, Section 4 is all yours. That includes the host's table, so don't mess up." Alana's stomach tightened. The host's table. You mean Julian Marshan himself? The billionaire bachelor. The man who hasn't smiled since his sister died 2 years ago. The guy who could buy and sell this hotel as a weekend hobby. Taking a deep breath, Alana lifted her tray and stepped out onto the ballroom floor. The guests were arriving. Women in designer gowns that probably cost more than she made in a year. Men in custom tuxedos with diamond cufflinks. They laughed and air-kissed and clinked champagne glasses, oblivious to the servers moving among them. Just as she'd been trained, Alana kept her eyes lowered, her movements efficient. She offered champagne cleared empty glasses and faded back to refill her tray. No one thanked her. No one noticed her, just as it should be. Then Julian Marin arrived. A hush fell over the crowd as he entered. Even without looking directly at him, Alana could feel his presence. At 41, Julian Marchand wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful. His investment firm controlled billions, and a single word from him could make or break the stock market. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, but there was a distance to him. His dark eyes revealed nothing, his smile never reaching them. The rumors were true. Grief had hollowed him out. "That's him," Marco whispered as they passed in the service corridor. "They say he hasn't dated anyone since his sister's death." Apparently, they were really close. Alana looked across the room at the man everyone was watching. He was handsome in a severe way, tall with dark hair just starting to silver at the temples, his tuxedo clearly tailored to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. But it was the loneliness surrounding him that struck her, like an invisible wall, keeping everyone at a distance. The evening progressed smoothly. Dinner was served, speeches were made, and donations poured in for whatever charity was being honored. Alana moved back and forth from the kitchen, serving courses and clearing plates. Her feet screaming in the borrowed shoes. The last round of wine service before dessert, Jenny announced to the staff. Then we're in the home stretch. Balancing a tray of red wine glasses, Alana made her way to the host's table. Her section, her responsibility. Julian Marshall sat with his back straight, barely touching his food, nodding at whatever the woman beside him was saying. Something about him made Alana pause. Perhaps the way his fingers kept absently touching the silver watch on his wrist, or the distant look in his eyes whenever he thought no one was watching. He looks as out of place as I feel, she thought suddenly. That's when it happened. Another server, new and nervous, backed up without looking, bumping hard into Alana. She stumbled, her balance already compromised by the too tight shoes. The tray tilted. Wine glasses slid. Red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth and directly onto Julian Moran's pristine white shirt and custom tuxedo jacket. Time seemed to stop. The music faded. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Every eye in the ballroom turned to stare. Crimson spread across the expensive fabric. Julian Marshund stood, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "I'm so sorry," Alana gasped, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "I'm so sorry, sir." She fumbled for the napkin at his place setting, then realized that touching him would only make things worse. This would cost her the job for sure. Maybe even a demand to pay for the ruined suit. Money she absolutely didn't have. "It was my fault," she stammered, head bowed, awaiting her sentence. "I'll go get the manager." But instead of the angry outburst she expected, there was silence. When she finally dared to look up, Julian Maran was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he did the unthinkable. He reached out and gently took the empty tray from her trembling hands, setting it aside on the table. His movement was careful, deliberate. "It's just a suit," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly soft. Then louder so others could hear. "But you look like you could use a dance." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Phones appeared, cameras flashing. The woman seated beside Julian, some socialite with diamonds dripping from her ears, looked as though she'd been slapped. I don't." Alana couldn't form a coherent sentence. This had to be some cruel joke. Any second now, he'd laugh and have security escort her out, but Julian Marshund didn't laugh. Instead, he held out his hand. "One dance, unless you'd prefer I call your supervisor." It wasn't really a choice. With her apron stained with wine and her borrowed shoes pinching her toes, Alana placed her hand in his. It was warm, his grip firm, but gentle as he led her to the center of the dance floor. The orchestra, after a confused pause and a nod from Julian, began to play again, a slow waltz. "I don't know how to dance like this," she whispered, mortified as he placed his other hand lightly on her waist. "Just follow my lead," he replied, guiding her into the steps. "And breathe. You look like you might faint." "Why are you doing this?" Alana asked, her voice barely audible over the music. "I ruined your suit." Something flickered in his eyes. A spark of what? Amusement? Interest? Maybe I was bored of pretending to enjoy myself. Maybe I wanted to give them something real to talk about for once. As they moved slowly across the floor, Alana became aware of just how close they were. She could smell his cologne, something expensive, but subtle. She could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, despite a close shave. He wasn't just handsome, he was real, human. "They're all watching us," she said, trying not to step on his polished shoes. "Let them watch." For the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips. "You have a name." "Alana. Alana Brooks." "Julian Marshand." She almost laughed. "I know who you are. And yet you're the first person tonight who's looked at me like I'm just a man, not a bank account." The music continued, and strangely, Alana began to relax. The steps came easier. The stairs bothered her less. For just this moment, she allowed herself to be seen. When the dance ended, Julian stepped back and gave her a small bow. "Thank you, Alana Brooks." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, cutting through the crowd of stunned onlookers as if they weren't there. The spell broken, Alana hurried back to the service area, her heart pounding. Jenny was waiting, her face white with shock. "What was that? Do you know who that was?" "I'm fired, aren't I?" Alana asked, removing her cap and letting her curls fall free. To her surprise, Jenny shook her head. "Mr. Martian's assistant just came by. He said, you're to take the rest of the night off with full pay." Marco appeared beside them, eyes wide. "Alana, you're all over social media already. Zon posted a video of the dance." He held up his phone, showing her the image that would soon be everywhere. Julian Marshand, the billionaire who never smiled, with his hand resting on the back of a server in a wine-stained apron. Both of them suspended in a moment that looked magical. "I just want to go home," Alana said, suddenly exhausted. 2 hours later, changed back into her jeans and sweater, Alana sat on the bus headed to her small apartment in the unfashionable part of town. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from co-workers who'd seen the video, asking what Julian Marchant had said, what it felt like to dance with him. She didn't answer. How could she explain that? For a few minutes, she'd felt something she hadn't felt in years. Something like value, worth, as if she weren't invisible after all. As the bus rumbled through the late-night streets, taking her back to her real life of double shifts and overdue bills, Alana told herself to forget it. Men like Julian Marin didn't exist in her world. Tomorrow, he wouldn't even remember her name. She was wrong. The next morning, as she dragged herself to her weekend job at the Suds and Duds laundromat, a black town car was parked outside. A driver in a uniform stood beside it, checking his watch. When he saw her approach, he straightened. "Ms. Brooks, Mr. Marchant would like to speak with you." The back door opened and there he was, Julian Marchant, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than her rent, looking at her with those same intense eyes. "Good morning, Alana," he said, as if this were a perfectly normal occurrence. "I believe we have a conversation to finish." And just like that, Alana Brooks's ordinary life was about to become extraordinary. Alana stood frozen on the sidewalk outside the laundromat. Julian Marchant, the Julian Marchant, was here in her neighborhood, sitting in a luxury car and looking at her like he'd been waiting all morning just to see her. "I'm working," she said finally, clutching her worn purse tighter. "I can't just leave." Julian stepped out of the car, drawing curious glances from passers-by. With his designer clothes and commanding presence, he stuck out in this neighborhood like a diamond in a coal pile. "I understand," he said. "What time do you finish?" Alana blinked in surprise. 4 o'clock, then I'll come back at 4. Before she could argue, he handed her a business card. "My personal number in case you change your mind." As he turned to leave, Alana found her voice. "Why? Why me? Is this some kind of joke?" Julian paused, looking back at her with those serious eyes. "No joke. Last night was the first real moment I've had in 2 years. I'd like to know why." Then he was gone, sliding back into the car that purred away from the curb, leaving Alana staring after it with the business card clutched in her hand. Inside the laundromat, Mrs. Patel, the owner, was already sorting detergents. "You're late, Heleda. And who was that man in the fancy car?" "Nobody," Alana said quickly, tucking the card into her pocket. "Just a mix-up." The morning passed in a blur of washing machines, folding tables and customers dropping off their weekly laundry. But Alana couldn't stop thinking about Julian's words. The first real moment in 2 years. What did that even mean? During her lunch break, she checked her phone and was shocked to find herself tagged in dozens of social media posts. The video of their dance had gone viral overnight. There she was in her stained apron and borrowed shoes being waltzed around the ballroom by one of the richest men in the country. The comments ranged from romantic to cruel. Cinderella moment. Who is she? Gold digger alert. Julian Moran's mystery woman. Alana quickly put her phone away, her appetite gone. She wasn't a mystery woman. She was just Alana Brooks, a woman working 3 jobs to stay afloat who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with thin walls who hadn't been on a real date in over 2 years because she simply didn't have the time or energy. At exactly 4 o'clock, the black town car returned. This time, Julian got out and came into the laundromat, causing Mrs. Patel to nearly drop the bottle of fabric softener she was holding. "You came back," Alana said, untying her work apron. "I said I would." Julian stood awkwardly among the rumbling dryers and folding tables. In this ordinary setting, he seemed both out of place and somehow more human. "I thought maybe we could talk over coffee." Mrs. Patel was practically vibrating with curiosity behind the counter. "Go ahead, Alana," she urged. "I can close up." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small cafe 3 blocks away. It wasn't fancy, just a neighborhood place with mismatched mugs and pastries that had been in the case since morning. But Julian didn't seem to mind. "The internet is talking about us," Alana said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. The internet always talks. Tomorrow it will be something else. Julian stirred his coffee, though he hadn't added anything to it. I'm sorry if it's caused you trouble. My roommate thinks I've been hiding a secret life from her. Alana smiled despite herself. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since last night. Julian's expression softened slightly. Mine too, though for different reasons. My publicity team wants to issue a statement. My friends think I've lost my mind. And Vivian Hartwell, she was sitting next to me at the gala. She's been calling non-stop. Vivian Hartwell, the woman with the diamonds. Alana remembered the look of shock on the socialite's face when Julian had asked her to dance. We dated briefly years ago. Julian dismissed it with a wave of his hand. It didn't work out. I'm sure you have lots of women wanting to date you, Alana said before she could stop herself. To her surprise, Julian laughed. A short rusty sound as if he didn't use it often. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But most people want to date my bank account, not me. There was no self-pity in his voice, just a statement of fact that made Alana look at him more closely. Behind the wealthy exterior was a man who seemed tired. Lonely even. Why did you ask me to dance? She asked directly. The truth. Julian was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug. When the wine spilled, everyone in that room was looking at you, waiting for me to be angry, to have you fired. It was like they were hungry for it. He looked up, meeting her eyes. But you looked at me like I was just a person who might need a napkin, not Julian Marshun the billionaire. Just a man with a stained suit. Alana hadn't expected such honesty. I was terrified, she admitted. But you stood your ground. You didn't cry or run away. You took responsibility. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare that is in my world? People either want something from me or they're afraid of me. You were neither. They talked for over an hour about nothing important and everything that mattered. Alana told him about growing up with a single mother who'd worked at the local bakery until arthritis made it impossible. How she'd put college on hold when her mother got sick. How she juggled multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. Julian talked about his younger sister, Maria, who had died of cancer 2 years ago. How she'd been his best friend, the only person who treated him normally. How empty his life had felt since then, going through the motions of business deals and charity galas without any real joy. She would have liked you, he said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. Maria, she always said I needed someone who wouldn't take my nonsense, Alana laughed. And do I not take your nonsense? You're sitting in a cafe with a man you just met, telling him your life story, so the jury's still out, but his eyes were warm when he said it, and Alana felt something flutter in her chest. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was setting. Julian insisted on driving her home, though Alana protested that her neighborhood wasn't what he was used to. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a hardware store, he said, surprising her again. My father worked 60 hours a week. I didn't have a neighborhood like this until after college. So, how did you? Alana gestured vaguely, meaning his current wealth. Software design. I created a security program that every major bank wanted. Sold it for 8 figures when I was 26. Invested the money, got lucky, he said it matter-of-factly, without pride or false modesty. The rest just happened. When they reached her apartment building, a worn brick structure with air conditioners rattling in most units. Julian walked her to the door. I'd like to see you again, he said simply. Alana hesitated. This was crazy. Men like Julian didn't date women like her. Why? Because when I'm with you, I remember what it's like to feel something. His honesty was disarming. But if you're not interested, I didn't say that. Alana interrupted. Then more cautiously. But my life is complicated. I work all the time. I can't just drop everything because a billionaire decided I was interesting for a day. Julian nodded, respecting her directness. Fair enough. How about tomorrow? You mentioned you're free on Sunday mornings. She hadn't expected him to remember that detail from their conversation. Yes, but I'll pick you up at 9 o'clock. Wear comfortable shoes. He smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. No dancing this time, I promise. Before she could argue further, he was gone, leaving Alana standing on her doorstep, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. Sunday morning arrived clear and crisp. Alana had barely slept, alternating between excitement and anxiety. What did one wear on, or was it a date, an outing, a bizarre social experiment? She settled on jeans, a simple blouse and comfortable boots, practical but nicer than her work clothes. At exactly 9, Julian pulled up, not in the town car, but driving himself in a modest SUV. He was dressed down in jeans and a sweater, looking more like a regular guy than a billionaire. "Where are we going?" Alana asked as she buckled her seat belt. "You'll see." 30 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a small bakery in a part of town Alana rarely visited. The sign above the door read Maria's Memories. "This was my sister's favorite place," Julian explained as they went inside. "She used to drag me here every Sunday. Said their cinnamon rolls were better than any 5-star restaurant." The bakery was warm and fragrant, with mismatched tables and chairs and photographs covering the walls. An elderly man behind the counter greeted Julian by name, his face lighting up. "Julian, it's been too long and you've brought a friend. Alana, this is George. He and his wife Elaine own this place. They've been feeding me since I was nobody." George winked at Alana. He was always somebody, just had less money and more hair back then. They settled at a corner tar.